Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live. The title of tonight's talk, it's about addiction, and it's called This Can Kill You. We're going to have an honest, productive, but bracingly honest discussion about the challenges that children face and what parents can do to have productive, helpful discussions with them. I'm going to be inviting my dear friend, Rabbi Gluck. Just one moment, please. Invited you. And this is the part of a series that we've been doing on the issue of addiction. And the idea is to give parents tools that they need to be able to have conversations with the children. Hello, Rabbi Tzvi, how are you? Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. I'm just trying to make sure that I can do this straight here, so please forgive me.
Sure.
I'm doing this on my own today, so let's hope it works out. But okay, I think we're good.
It sounds perfect, Rabbi Tzvi. Thank you very much for joining. So to everyone, we invited teenagers to come on with their parents because we think it's a helpful thing to do to get information. And these talks were designed that parents can do it together with the children of it. See, the backstory is, as I told you, I felt that there's sort of a perfect storm here with the children having all this information and misinformation from their smartphones and hearing from their friends about substances, with these new additional, over the last, anyone who's parenting a teenager, for them, vaping and hookah and legalized marijuana is a totally new experience. And the kids honestly just run rings around many parents when they want to have discussions with them and throw things out at them like, what's more dangerous? Marijuana is less dangerous than a drink. No one overdoses on marijuana, and lines like that. And many of the parents just get a little frozen. That this is what people are telling me. You're much more in this space than I am. So, Rabbi Tzvi, thank you. Before we start, thank you for all you do for the community. You're keeping Oliver Shalom's Mendy Klein's vision alive, who was Mendy founded Amudim together with Tzvi and had this dream of being able to provide the widest range of services for families. And God bless you, Tavei Alechem Bracha, for pulling it off and doing it with such devotion. Thank you.
I say you're welcome. I tease about people, but I say if I would have really known everything that would go into this, I'm not sure I would have done it, which is why I'm happy that I didn't know, So I do this a little bit on the, on both sides of the coin. But it's interesting. You mentioned about the parents part, right? So, I don't really get that often to do my presentations. Baruch Hashem, I have amazing staff that are really dedicated and do it. But there is, I'm going to give a shout out. There's a school, SKA, in the Five Towns that I've been for many, many years doing a panel discussion every year with somebody in recovery, with members of law enforcement community, and it's been a beautiful thing. And what I found impressive is it's a mandatory evening where the parents have to be there with their daughters. And I tell people all the time, and I say it at that event as well, scare tactics, I mean, could they work? Could they not work? It's a tough call. But opening up to the awareness of it is always going to be an amazing thing. More importantly is, why don't kids feel comfortable to speak to their parents about things, right? Well, there's a variety of reasons. But once that ice is broken and the students are sitting with the parents in the school, which means that the barriers are gone, now is a good time to be able to have that discussion, and they can bring it up. And I'll tell you, I say this all the time, and I have a tremendous hakar satayv to you for helping guide me when I was a teenager in many different ways. And, it's it's always a pleasure to be able to bring that back. But one of the things that you were very strong about and discussing back then was parents spending time and actually knowing their children. Right? That was a very important thing. And, I've said this story before, and then we'll go into the crux of it, but I just want to explain this part because it's really, really, really important. In my opinion is, when I gave my first ever public speech about sexual abuse, if you remember, in Borough Park in a shul on 45th Street, this is 16, 17 years ago. It's a very interesting.
When it wasn't happening.
Right. It's still not happening. I mean, if anyone asks, it's just an excuse for job security for myself and the staff at Amudim. These things don't really happen. But then it for sure wasn't happening. And in that speech, I made a comment about something like spending time with your kids. Long story short, I came home and my daughter says to me the next day, she was little, she's now 19 in seminary, so this is a long time ago, and she says, Tati, I want to have dinner together as a family. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, but we do it on Shabbos. She goes, no, during the week and without interruptions. And for many years, I mean, now my kids are older, so it's a tough thing now, but for many years, we had a family dinner when there were no phones allowed by the table,
including
mine. And you know what? First of all, the world did go on, which was an amazing concept. Yeah. And I'll never forget when I got my smartwatch, I forgot to take it off, and my daughter looks at me and says, you're wearing your Apple Watch, take it off, it counts. So much so that my son, Mayor Yehuda, MJ, got injured in a park and was taken to the hospital and was about to go in for a procedure, surgery, whatever it was, pins, and he starts shrieking and screaming. And my wife looks at him and goes, what's wrong? What's going on? This is what hurts. We're missing family dinner.
Wow.
And that's when it really hit home. So these are topics that it's not just that parents have to talk to their kids, but this is really what I have to say is that parents have to understand that children see everything. They know everything. You can't just talk to your kids about dangers of something and then go out and get high and get drunk and think it's okay. You can't. I mean, we had the story, and I've mentioned it to you before. I'll say it again because it's so important, And by the way, I have this big problem with and we do it anyway, but with the Purim drive about not drinking. Because it seems to me that we're focusing on Purim. What about the other 364 days of the year when it's just as bad, right? So
Purim is a time, I think what you and I have been focusing on for 20 years now is that the entry level for kids that start, and that's what's different. And there's also a lot of peer pressure on the adults who are in recovery or struggling with sobriety, and that's a horrible day for them, So that's. I just want to tell you before you were speaking about the family time. I don't know if you're aware that family dinner thing. Remember those ads, parenting the anti-drug? Remember they had the parenting? That came from a study. Are you aware? Came from a study, the CASA, the Center for Alcohol and Substance Abuse, in 1996, 7, 8, like then, did a study on what stops kids from using, and one of the top 5 predictors. They said that families that have dinner, I think it was 5 times a week or 4 times a week, or regularly, so, but the number had a much lower drug rate than the ones that didn't have dinner together. And that doesn't mean if they have dinner once a week, it doesn't count. It just meant with every additional piece of family time together, that increased it. That's why they started all those ads. And also, I've been doing classes called Tell Me Anything. In other words, how can parents get to the place where kids talk to them? And there's actually stunning research on adolescent disclosure that says that there are 5 different studies that I quote. Most of it has to do with parents not freaking out and parents spending quality time and kids having trust. And one quick thing, I really want to get into the topic with Rabbi Tzvi. But I just want to point out to the parents, I encourage parents to think of the barriers In other words, why do the children not want to talk to you? And honestly, they just have to be eliminated. And if you want to be able to have that conversation with the children, so they're embarrassed, they don't want to get punished, they don't want to disappoint you. They're afraid you're not going to keep their confidentiality. They're going to get punishments. So really, it requires a different type of parenting where you tell the kids, we want to hear, we want to be involved in your life, and it's okay to tell us something. We want to punish you for something you tell us. To eliminate those barriers. It's really as complicated and as simple as that.
So let's use that as a segue to jump right into this. So there was a family member of mine that had this rule with his kids. That was, no matter what you do, I don't care what it is. If you're ever in trouble, I'm going to have a deal with you. You call me. I will protect you, help you, pick you up, and I will never bring up that issue to you again. Period. End of story. Now that sounds like a real weird type of thing until a 14-year-old boy in that family, or 15-year-old, got really drunk one night and called his father and said, "Ta, I'm drunk and we have a deal." Yeah. And his father came and picked him up and never mentioned it again. But the irony is he never got drunk again, because just knowing that his father went to pick him up when he was that drunk, and I will say that we've been putting in this thing before Purim, where it's something I've been speaking about a long time, saying if anybody ever says no to a drink, never offer them a second one. It doesn't matter whether it's a l'chaim, a kiddush, a wedding, a bar mitzvah. Never offer a second one, because no one knows if that person is going to, fall off the wagon. You don't know if they said no because they're sober. It doesn't matter. And we've been putting out this one image, the same image, for the last 4 or 5 years on Purim.
Yeah, it's great.
And we continuously get amazing comments about it. But now let's talk about, we talk about the... So because I don't like talking about Purim, let's start with that. Because that's what I don't like talking about, which is this concept of people feel that they're, especially kids, there's a mitzvah to get drunk on Purim, right? Now, I know that what I'm going to say now is going to, certain people in the rabbinate are going to get upset at me, but that's okay, and I've done it before. The mitzvah of getting drunk on Purim, I don't believe is spelling out that you have to get drunk on Purim. And I'm also wondering if at the time there were no cars, airplanes, people that were getting drunk, and there were less opportunities back then of actual damage or danger. And the world does change. The world does evolve. And the clock doesn't stop because something that might have been acceptable, right, wrong, or indifferent 2,000 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever, is now the same thing. And we are living in a different world. And I will tell you this. I have a teenage son who, this is now right after Bar Mitzvah, and he's talking to me about, well, what about getting drunk? The Rabbi, the this, the that. And I'm like, Tzaddik, I'm your father, and he teases with me because he knows that he'll get a rise out of by saying this. But like, it's such a thing that I'm looking at these 13-year-old boys, and I'm wondering, where did we go wrong? It's something. It's not just the yeshivas. It's not just the classrooms. It's their friends. It's others. It's everywhere, and it's one of those things where the other piece of that puzzle is there's a lot of mitzvahs in the Torah that we know are there. I find it so interesting that people pick and choose which ones are going to be the most important. But you know what? I have to say this, and I hate, Mendy Klein over Shalom used to always say, don't give me the war stories. But Lamaisa, sometimes you have to. And I got to say this. One of the earlier calls I got about alcoholism was a bacher in yeshiva who was in first year Beis Medrash and was the top in his shir, top in his class, you name it. He was everything that was going, and he tripped one day while holding his thermos, walking into the Beis Medrash. And the thermos was open because he was drinking his morning coffee.
And the coffee.
And when it fell on the floor, there was a very strong smell of alcohol, and it turned out that this guy was drinking a liter of vodka a day.
The leader.
A liter. Now, people are going to say, well, how was he not drunk all the time? Well, let's remember that bodies build up tolerance, whether it's to drugs or alcohol.
Right.
But that this person needed the liter of alcohol a day was a much greater symbol.
Right.
Now, I am going to tell you that he did his liver was shot, meaning when his liver was shot, and he's actually, I followed up a couple of 2-3 years ago. He's had like 2 or 3 surgeries since then, and a blood transfusion. But the point is, it all started from somebody pressured him into having that drink. And let's be honest, Rabbi Horowitz, do you remember your first time you had hard alcohol? Honestly. No.
I wasn't much of a drinker. I never was.
So I wasn't.
I never look. I think honestly, I think one of the things that yeshivas should do more of is have the kids play ball more, because first of all, it blows a lot of steam off, and we, I spend 3 hours a day playing basketball. And, you had to be in shape. None of my friends smoked. None of us did. Look, I have a few years on you. But I just want to, just for the record, I just want to tell you, Rabbi, that Dr. Benzin Twersky and I did a phone call, a conference call with Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky Shlita 15 years ago. Actually have it noted to post it tomorrow. And we asked Rav Shmuel about smoking on Purim, and he unequivocally said, it's an aveira to get drunk on Purim, and he said it's an aveira to say it's a mitzvah to get drunk on Purim. And he quoted some Chazal, some Gemara, not for now, but I'm going to post it tomorrow. We have a recording. There were about 400 or 500 people on the conference call. So just for the record, and there are those who disagree with that, but I don't think we need to concentrate on like you said, there's plenty of other mitzvahs.
I will say that this year, by the way, I noticed there's been about 6 or 7 different postings of sober Purim parties being hosted by the living room, our place, our village.
Yeshivas are doing it.
Yeshivas are doing it. My son's yeshiva, they have a whole system where they're picking up the boys to get them for a masiba, to be with the Rabbeim, to not get drunk. But you mentioned about playing ball more, right? I mean, again, you were a principal and an educator for many years. In what planet was it ever considered normal for someone to be in school from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night? I'm just curious.
Look, I said I got a couple of years on you. I went to Torah Vodaas. I graduated high school in 1976. Our yeshiva, we had 1 o'clock dismissal on Sunday, 12 o'clock on Friday, and the other days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we were dismissed at 6 o'clock, period. Night Seder was voluntary. So what happened? Guys like me went and played basketball, and Rabbi Shachni Weinberger and Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, and Rabbi Berolina, they were all the best medrash. You're self-selected, whatever.
Here's the other very important thing that I like to say, and this applies to teenagers, adults, to anybody, right? So first of all, how often do we hear of a car accident, Rahman al-Islan, with a drunk driver, and people die, but the drunk driver generally does not end up dead? Now, I will tell you that from the people that I know,
they have an airbag, probably.
Nope. There's actually a whole physiological reason behind it, because, when somebody falls down, they put their hand down and then they break their hand. But if their body would just be loose and they would let it fall, nothing would happen. So when they're drunk, people don't generally realize there's going to be an accident, so they don't tense up. But I will tell you that those drunk drivers actually do die that day, because for the rest of their lives, I have never met anyone yet, whether it was, the person knowingly was drunk, didn't realize, we come up with every excuse. I don't know anybody that was able to live with themselves in a healthy manner after they took someone else's life, especially for something that was so reckless. But it's not just that. People always say, like, well, what about if they're doing it in a safe place and they're in a building? Well, people, when they're drunk and high on any drugs, your body, you do not think through things. And I could tell you that I myself know of at least 7 deaths by people that died while they were drunk, either running into a street, getting hit by a car, falling off a balcony. I mean, things that
And how many times have we heard? I interviewed Atala people years ago who were talking about people in toxic shock that went into shock. See, can I just pivot a little bit
Sure.
to the parents trying to sort their way through conversations with their children when there's so much information and misinformation swirling around. In other words, the parents tell the children not to, to smoke or not to smoke, and then they start telling them that vaping is safer and hookah is this and marijuana is like. What would be your advice to the average parent who's listening and hopefully has a teenager next to him or her, and they want to have some conversations about it? I have some thoughts on this. I'd like to hear yours. What should parents do if they feel that they themselves are not, let's put it this way, they're not as knowledgeable as the kids, or they're not knowledgeable, if they feel that they're not really knowledgeable as they should be, and they want to have some conversations with the children, and then I'll tell them, for example, about gateway drugs and about they shouldn't start, and isn't the kids say, no, it's not true. What would you advise parents to do in that situation? And
okay, so
parents, we're going to be opening up soon. We're going to be taking
questions. Right.
Via I'll announce it in about 10-15 minutes.
No problem. So I'll say like this. First of all, I always love, and this is more on drugs than alcohol, when I used to give speeches years ago in high schools, and these kids were all pharmacologists, every single one of them. But if I have this amount, that amount, there's excuses. And one of the things we know in life is if people are going to look to make excuses and justify something, no matter what you say or do, is going to just, they're not going to listen. My suggestion when it comes to dealing with children is speak to them as you would a peer, a coworker, as if you're talking to an adult. Instead of talking down, first thing is have the conversation where it can be had smoothly. Now, there are so many websites, drugabuse.gov, the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, that have great talking points. And I always say this, use the scientific data. Use the data that the brain does not fully develop until someone is at least 23 years old. Most scientists will say 26. Yeah. But how does that affect?
That's the frontal lobe that controls executive function, parents. It means that's the part, the decision-making part. The front, it's like the brakes. It's like the brakes on that part of the brain is that's what Rabbi Tzvi was referring to. Please go ahead.
And it's not just that's the decision-making. The problem is that it actually stops the brain from being able to generate and regenerate cells. Right. So it's when people are using drugs or alcohol, which is affecting their brain growth development, that will affect them the rest of their lives. Right. And I will say this, I have plenty of people that I meet with regularly that are sober, they've went through programs, they were severe addicts, and they're still suffering years later. But again, instead of the scare tactics, it's the scientific components of it. Talk about all these, I was a paramedic for over 20 years, right? And that's all. And I could tell you people that have serious long-term conditions, serious long-term things from using drugs and alcohol. But the real question becomes is, before the parents even talk to the kids, right? Can the parents talk to their kid? Meaning, let's be very realistic, right? Between cell phones, texting, I'm busy, I'm on the phone. The first thing the parents have to do is say, wait, this is time with my child. Dr. Pelkowitz said it years ago, just put your kid in the back seat of the car and drive so that they're not worried that they're looking directly at you or you're looking at them. And don't answer any phones, don't do anything. And you know what? It may not happen the first time, may not happen the second, may not happen the third. But at some point, they'll start feeling able to open. And I'll tell you, personally, I'm a board game person. I will play board games with my kids.
Great. Busy, not nervous, not right.
Right. And then conversations flow. Things come out because there's open talk.
I always say that the best conversations happen when you're around and the kids are ready to talk. It's both of them. In other words, when you're around and they're ready to talk. Because if you sit down with a kid and say, I want to talk to you right now about this, in all likelihood, you're going to start getting pushback. They're ready at their rhythm. You know, when the kids, you know, our youngest Kanara is an Amudim, right? Sarah, she was
Not client, not client. You know, people are busy saying, "What do you mean
oh,
Amudim something?" No,
she worked. Yes,
she
thank
worked
you.
she
Yes.
worked at Amudim. You know, and she was very, very. I actually saw her name today on something. Actually, interestingly enough.
So you know, so that the kids are grown, but as long as the children were home, I never ever went upstairs till every kid was home. I slept on the couch. I would stay on the couch in the family in the living room. I had my spot there, and I never went upstairs until the last one was home. And they would tap me on the shoulder if everybody was home. That, you know something, I wanted to be there. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be available for them to talk. You never know
But
what
let me ask you a
happens.
question. When you were available for them to talk and you thought they weren't looking, did you sneak away and have alcohol or drugs? Or in today's day and age, when these parents are getting high regularly, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, when we put out the Kiddush Club video, and I strongly suggest people watch it, not as a shout out to the video, but it's such a realistic
It is, yeah.
storyline.
It is, yeah.
And I got to tell you, you know how many of my wife's friends called her and said, "Wow, thank you so much. That's exactly what I've been going through with my husband." And how many of my friends said they're never going to talk to me again. But
Yeah.
that's a separate issue.
Yep.
The concept is, though, kids are watching.
Yeah.
And when somebody is out there using drugs or alcohol, and they think either they'll justify it because it's legal. You know, let's remember, why is alcohol even legal in America? Because the government couldn't deal with the prohibition and the amount of murder and crime that was going on. It didn't become legal because it's good, because it's healthy. Now, again, I'm the first to admit it. I'm a fan of moderation, not prohibition. If somebody is not an addict and they want to enjoy a drink or something, I'm not going to tell people what to do, what not to do. But I will say, not when your kids are watching. I will say that if someone is going to, you know, get high on drugs, that marijuana is legal now, so what's the problem? Well, what's the problem is it still affects brain development. It affects growth. It affects healthy decision-making processes. And I have to say this, very often when people, you know, people used to always say, people only become an addict because of A, B, C, and D. That's not true. People get addicted to things because they get addicted to it. The substance builds its way in. And these are things that must be understood. And I know that, like, it's so common now. And by the way, I'm going to say this, the new phenomenon, the last couple of years, we've been getting more and more calls about middle-aged women that are serious addicts and alcoholics. Now, that was not, you know, mothers of 5 kids were not the ones we were sending for treatment. And I got to say this is probably one of the scariest I've ever had to deal with, which is sending a couple to rehab. Now, what makes it scary is you got to be very smart. You can't send one and not the other, because that one comes back and then the other one is still using and the person will relapse. So now you have to worry about children in a family not having parents there because they're going, you know, for treatment or things, and these things destroy families. You know, it's now at the same time we have to also be respectful if somebody does have a problem and they want help, to help them get the help that they want.
Because the parents, right? If they're home and abusing substances, that they're better. You know, the kids are better off being with the grandparents.
Right.
I want to tell you, by the way, there was a great deal of research on COVID during those 2 years. There was a very big spike in the drinking alcohol rates among adults, but the women had a much bigger spike than the men. I don't know if you're aware. The women had a bigger
I am very well aware because I ran the cases that Amudim opened up, and alcoholism,
you noticed
huge. I could show you after this. I could show you on our platform. We have a system. There's no names or case numbers, but it shows actual real data from our system. The trends were ridiculous, and it didn't stop, though. That's the other issue, is that we're dealing now with so many after effects, and daytime alcoholism has become so common And let me also remind everybody, right? So we talk about addiction, right? And everyone's like, "Oh, you're scaring me." Listen, let's be honest. If this is your brain, this is your brain on drugs ad campaign, just made me hungry for scrambled eggs. I'm the first to admit that, but I have to say this,
Don't ever
okay?
change, sweet.
Oh, I don't plan on it, but it is so scary how many people that have died of drug overdoses or aneurysms, depending on what you call it, or now COVID, but what we know what they're dying from, that were accidental. These are people that were trying to get better, getting off drugs, and for one reason or another, and we can go into the science behind it, the body builds up the tolerance to it, and then you get sober, then there's the resistance, and you're using the higher dose, and we can get into the details, but the one thing that is the fact that doesn't change is most people that die of overdoses are accidental deaths. And what happens when somebody dies of an overdose? It destroys everyone in their circle, parents, siblings, spouses. I mean, there is so much, and the hurt is so bad. And I got to also say, from a fiscal standpoint, I think there was a study done. Addiction cost the American public a few $1 trillion a year. Now,
Lost wages and treatment,
lost wages,
and
treatment,
and
relocations, and these are things that must be understood. And you know what? When we utilize a holiday as an excuse, or it's like, everybody's like, Mark, but I only do wine, I only do scotch, I have to make kiddush. At the end of the day, I must say this, growing up in a frum Jewish environment, we are much more prone to seeing alcohol used on a regular basis. Every Shabbos, every Simcha, every Yom Tov. Now, there's grape juice. There's also moderation. There's also ways to be smart about it. But we have to understand that we do have a predisposition for our children seeing alcohol earlier and more often than others. And the one thing I hate this question. I hate it. And there's no good answer to it. Well, if my kid's anyway going to drink, is it better if I have them drink or do the drugs in the house so I see that they're doing it or not, or does that make it acceptable? Or the other question is, well, so which is worse, drugs or alcohol? Like these are things where, and people ask it seriously. It's like, how about work with the other side? How about let's educate the kids not to drink? Let's lead by example, not to do drugs. Let's not get to that point where it's like, I want you to do it in front of me. No,
right.
I don't want you to do it in front of me. This has to be done in a smart way.
I asked Dr. Tversky this question specifically. I asked him, our boys were teenagers, and I felt that I told them that that if they want to drink beer, they should tell me what kind they want, and I'll have it in the house for Shabbos with super sauce. And I said, if I catch you in somebody's backyard or walking around with a paper bag, we're gonna have a real conversation. So I used to go to 7-Eleven and pick up before Shabbos. Dr. Tversky said that. By the way, I asked him. He said he absolutely recommends that the house be completely dry.
Well, mentioning Dr. Tversky, by the way, I want you to know, I got a lot of complaints today. I was very close with him. Okay, I mean, a lot of my friends were family members, and it was Uncle Shi and not Abraham. But either which way, there was a video that was put out by an organization to raise money, and it just came out 4 days ago.
Yeah.
It already has thousands of views, and it uses a song that was sung and composed by the Tversky family, and the grandchildren are so upset. This video is all about alcohol. It's like making fun of like Hoshanis, but for Purim, so using alcohol, walking around the bima, and it's like
they were promoting using.
That's what it seems to me when I saw it. I'm seeing famous singers that are holding bottles of alcohol, running around the bima, and doing. I mean, and this is like.
What did they sing?
I don't know. We can.
That was his song. He composed that song that he played
you
it
hear
at his Levaya.
Hear it? and then it goes into the song itself.
I told you, he composed that for his brother's weddings. Do you know that?
Yes, and this is now being used promoting alcoholism, and this is a song by the person who was the first in our world to publicly go out and do it.
He was the first. He was 1 through 20.
Yeah, 1 through 100 even. But I gotta say something. This is where people have to learn the difference. And by the way, I made this mistake myself, and I'm going to admit it because I did it. When we first started Amudim, somebody hosted a fundraiser for us, and the fundraiser included some sort of alcohol tasting. And I'm going to be honest, it was the first ever fundraising event we ever did. It was the last one we ever did with alcohol, but it was the first one. Mm-hmm. And the people try justifying it by saying, but it's not the clients that are coming to these events. I'm like, yeah, but it's bad taste. And you have to be very careful when you have a Ma'aser HaKodesh, you have something that you're doing to help people, and you're personifying alcohol now.
Your organization.
Well, but I'm saying even more than that. It's any organization. It's anything that's dealing with helping people, saving people, whatever it is. You don't personify alcohol. You don't personify drugs. You don't do this cigar rolling. People want to enjoy things on their own in an adult time. I can understand that, but you got to be smart.
You know, it's also one thing that I've been talking about a lot lately. You know, I interviewed Rabbi Heshi Billet a few years ago. I did Instagram Live. I know one of the first. He made Young Israel of Woodmere go dry, probably 20 years ago, maybe more. And it was real leadership because he got tremendous pushback, and it's a very large shul, and he just he just moved it forward. And you told me a great idea. But I remember, I'm 99% sure it was you, that people who are having alcohol, they should put it only on the head table.
Oh,
was that
so yes.
your idea?
Yes. So I started with that, but I actually grew out of that already. I want you to know, I grew out of that idea, and I'll tell you what it is.
Let's just stay for a minute and share it with the public.
So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share both ideas, the old one and the new one. I'm sorry. Yep. So the original idea was we have a lot of kids, teenagers especially, and by the way, adults too, by the way, that go to a simcha, get drunk, and I said years ago, I said, you know what? The bottle should always be by the head table, so you have to go there and get the drink. And I really meant that. But then I realized
if somebody keeps coming back.
But then I realized that wasn't really solving the issue. So I came up with a new policy. I don't know who's going to use it.
We don't talk often enough.
I
didn't need a new one.
Right, so I put together a whole proposal for this, and I'm hoping to get it into the shuls, but it's going to take some time. Maybe we'll do it together. We can work on this. Anytime there's alcohol at any event, it can only be served by, I'm going to say bartender, or by a messenger, or by a trusted adult, but served, meaning not watching the alcohol, serving the alcohol. So that means nobody has access to bottles other than this trusted adult. And this way, when they see another adult coming by and the person is already on their third shot, buddy, hold up, have a nice day. Yeah. Now, I have to say this. I made my son's bar mitzvah, and it was a completely dry bar mitzvah. The Shabbos that I had the Kiddush, there was alcohol with the bartender, and with very strict instructions, to the point that people were like, I'm trying to make Kiddush. I'm like, so use grape juice. I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait, because that's the way it's going to be. And it's got to be done by example. Now, I do say sometimes that people make a dry shul, you end up with a wet house next door. So you got to be very, very careful of how to deal with that as well. Right. But yes, the idea is there should never be alcohol unattended, ever. And by the way, even in your own house, and I say this, take out a bottle, make a l'chaim, put the bottle back away when you're done. And in my house, you will never see alcohol. Well, yeah, no, but then they fill it up with other things. I got to tell you, I've seen, wow, it's good. People are getting creative. But the other thing is, in my house, there is no alcohol that is in a display case. It is behind a closed cabinet. I had this story. I went to do an intervention at somebody's house. And then after this, I'll let you take back over and, go open up. But I walk into the house to do the intervention. It was a serious alcoholic. And it was a wealthy balabas. The guy had a good job. It wasn't, and liked to call himself a functioning, addict. Mm-hmm. I walk into the house. The first thing I see, I don't even get past the front door, is this beautiful display of wine and booze and this and that, everything, you name it. And I just turned around and I went to the door. And his wife was like, "Where are you going?" I said, "If I'm an addict and I come home every day to see this, there's no chance I'm getting sober. Like, what are you thinking? Like, why would you put this right in front of them?" And the other thing was, and I said this also in a previous speech, we hosted a bunch of yeshiva bachurim sukkahs for meals. All of a sudden, every yeshiva bachur is now an expert. This wine, this vintage, this. First of all, I got to tell you, I did this a few times. I filled up one with another just to prove to people that whatever's on the bottle is what they... And I've done it to prove a point, but like the concept that a 22-year-old really thinks they're going to get into this discussion of how...
14-year-olds.
14-year-olds we know, but I'm saying the 22-year-olds are legally able to drink. So the fact that a 14-year-old's doing it is completely unacceptable. I'm saying one different. This 22-year-old's legal age. And now they still think they're experts and they're not careful and their brain is still developing. When the younger siblings, when the 14-year-old sees that, why shouldn't the 14-year-old want to copy it? When a father comes home drunk from shul or from a party or from his friend's house, why shouldn't his kids want to drink? When the mother is sitting out having this, wine smack in the middle of the day because she's home and is stressed out and makes a comment, "Oh, I need this to relax." Well, guess what? Your kids are seeing that. And when they need to relax, why won't they open up your cabinet and try to get to it? So these are things that we say about the parents, lead by example. And really do it.
Just one last thing, folks. I'm gonna, if anybody has any questions they'd like to present to either Rabbi Gluck, myself, I'm gonna scroll through the old ones if there's anything there. I got some questions that people wrote into me. I'll share them unless anyone has. Okay, I see Sam Management asked if you can ask questions. The answer is yes right now. I just want to mention, on behalf of loved ones of people who are struggling with sobriety. Not to, Tzvi said earlier, Tzvi said about when, if somebody tells you no once, don't ask them again. But to be so mindful when you're pushing alcohol on someone, it is, for someone who's struggling with sobriety, their whole family is never sitting, on pins and needles, hoping that their loved one won't fall off the wagon. So please be mindful. In the general population, they say it's like 1 in 11, 12, 13 people who have an alcohol problem. If you have a shul with 300 people, that means you got a couple of dozen people there who are struggling with sobriety. So please be mindful. Anybody has any questions, please? Now would be a good time. I'm scrolling through. I don't see anything specific.
Oh, so I got a question here. Somebody sent me a question. Let me just read it.
Please do.
Okay. The question is, I agree with what you're saying, but my husband apparently doesn't. How do I deal with that?
That is a good question.
I'm just going to...
I'm sorry?
I'm asking her to elaborate because I think I know what she means, but I want to... Yeah, okay.
She's concerned that her husband isn't.
My husband comes home drunk regularly from Simchas and Shabbos, always claiming it's time to wind down. The kids see it, and when I try to argue, he tells me I'm just trying to ruin his fun. So that also sounds like a little bit of a shalom bias issue, not just...
I think they should go together to a therapist and talk about it, because first of all, it's not healthy to have such different approaches to such an important thing. And look, you don't know exactly what the details are, but that's beyond what we can do here. But only to say that that is worthy of going to someone together that both of you respect and trying to sort things out. It is very harmful for children. We both know children who grew up in families where one of the parents has or both have a substance abuse and alcohol problem. They die 1,000 deaths of embarrassment when they're around in front of other people. It is so destructive, and it really should be going for help.
Okay, here's another question sent to me to my WhatsApp, but addressed to you.
Yes,
But
please.
the person didn't want to post it on Instagram.
I should be checking mine. I
My
will.
my
Go ahead.
14-year-old son has said unequivocally he is going to get drunk at his Rebbe's house on Purim, and I can't stop him because it's the halacha. How do I respond?
I don't think
Question
they're going to win this.
was addressed to you.
I don't think, honestly, I don't think you're going to be able to stop your child. It's going to be very, very difficult. Peer pressure is extraordinarily strong on a regular day, let alone for something like this. I mean, you should say what you're saying, but if he tells you that, I think you're better off waiting for after Purim and have a discussion. You should definitely talk to him about getting, to control his drinking at least, and to call you or text you. Give him a phone if you have a phone in the house, a family phone, and tell him to text you if he's in trouble. What C said earlier, Rabbi said about not to, picking up a child when they get into trouble and never saying it again. I actually have a little amended version, Svi. I wrote it about 5-6 years ago in Times of Israel. I've been posting it every year. I say 24 hours. I won't discuss it with you for 24 hours. But it's the same concept. The concept is that you call us when you're in trouble, because God forbid if they can't call us, then they get into more trouble. But I don't see how, if that's the culture in the school and the Rebbe that we want them to respect. I'm not gonna.
So that's right. So that's where my pet peeve comes into that,
Yeah.
and I would go a step further.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I would actually reach out to the principal of the school and possibly to the Rebbe and say, "Listen, if this happens, I'm going to be there to protect my son, but I'm going to report you for plying underage kids with alcohol." Like, there's no. I mean, at some point, you got to put your foot down.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying, if the child says I'm going to drink, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. You can tie him up or keep him home, but like, you're honestly, this is something that you try to think about when you look at schools in the first place. There are lots of schools that would be unthinkable. That person would lose their job over. So if people allowing it, then. I don't know at this point. I'm saying that's what I'm saying. I don't know at this point. You certainly should try, but it doesn't sound like you're gonna. It doesn't sound like you're going to be. I don't give it very high possibility of success because of peer pressure. You certainly could pull out all the stops and use every card you have in the deck to try to get him to stop. But at least l'chal pachas, make sure that he's in a safe environment. And that he can get out of it if he finds himself getting into trouble. But you're still the parent. It's up to you to stop the child. I agree. I'm not saying you shouldn't try. I'm saying don't be frustrated if you see it's not working. And the kid told his parents already, I'm leaving. I'm going. You're the parent. If you have the ability, Stephen Covey, folks. Stephen Covey. I just did 4 weeks in my parenting clips. On Covey's time management of balancing your family life. He talks about emotional bank accounts. And he says that when you, like Steve was saying earlier, when you spend time with your kids and you make, like you invest in the bank account, then you could make a withdrawal. But if you don't have enough deposits, if you don't have enough deposits in there, then your check bounces. Right. So theoretically, I'm sorry?
I just don't want to forget this comment. I'm sorry. That wrote, I would be helpful if my parents provided education when I was a teenager. That's part of what we're all trying to do. That's part of why we keep putting out these different events and things. My friends my age, we're all in agreement with that, and that's why we're pressuring to get children these days to really, to be able to speak to their parents openly, and for parents to be able to have the conversations openly.
Right, and I'm sorry if I came across as saying like the parents, there's nothing they could do. That really wasn't fair. I think you should definitely speak and try to do whatever you can. Try to educate. Go to your pediatrician. Go together to your pediatrician or someone else you respect who works in the space who can give more information. I'm just saying, if he's in a class and everybody's doing it and his Rebbe is doing it, that's
We're just
a tough.
being realistic. When a teenager says they're going to do something, let's be honest, they're going to do it one way or the other, and they might do it despite. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try,
Right.
but
Right.
there's also something else I want to add to that, which is if you try to the point that you're shutting out your teenager or you're pushing him or her away, then you're actually in a worse off situation because you need to make sure that communication is going to be there. Because at the end of the day,
I agree 100%. Right.
that's what they're going to need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Now,
My shul.
what please, if I'm understanding what you're saying, if you're going to get into a rip-roaring fight over this before Purim, and then he goes out and is doing it anyway, then you're not going to, in all likelihood, you're not going to get a call if there's a problem, and you're not going to be in a position where you have any juice. You don't have anything to play here. So I think that's a big part of it. I want to, I mentioned, I wanted to, there's a concept, I didn't mention it earlier. Did I ever tell you the story, Steve, with one of our daughters? I asked the permission. She said she gave me permission to say it in public. That our youngest, Sarah, she was 15 years old. One of the parents in her class, one of her classmates' parents, was making a very wild party on Purim, and she asked me if she could go. And I said, obviously I wasn't happy about it, but I said, there's a thing called scaffolding. When they put up a bridge or a building, they put that those bars around it so people shouldn't fall off. Scaffolding means you let your kids do something, but you have a protective barrier around it in case there's a problem. So I told her that the only way you can go, you have to take a phone and let me know when you think you don't belong there anymore, and I'll come pick you up right away. And the other thing was, I said, I picked 3 parents in her class, parents of her classmates. I said that one of those parents had to be there. In other words, there had to be somebody there the whole time. And I would have gone myself, but because I am who I am, it's like you're inviting the Malach HaMavos to a party.
I get that all the time.
And then she's going to get pushback from her friends. So I want to, so what I did, it was really a remarkable story to me. So I sent, I dropped her off, and her friend's father was there the whole time. Anyway, I don't remember. It seemed to me like 5 hours. It was probably 45 minutes later. I get a text now with like a bunch of exclamation points. And I went to pick her up, and some of the boys were getting very rowdy, and she got frightened. She really was scared. She came to the car. And I didn't say a word the whole way home. It was so difficult. I didn't say a word. But I didn't go up to bed either. I stayed on the couch because I figured sooner or later she's going to calm down. Whatever, late at night, she came down. She says, "Tal, why'd you let me go?" So I said, "What would you have learned if I would have told you not to go?" I said, "Look what you learned now." I said, "I knew you were safe because you had a friend here." And I said, 3 years ago, Sarah was always very respectful. 3 years ago, before then, there was a Lagoma party, and she texted me from the party, it was in Viola Park. She texted me that, "Todd, I don't think you would want me here. Now please pick me up." So I said, you earned some credit with me. That's the daughter. She's a therapist now, Baruch Hashem, and she's working at Amudim. She was working at Amudim as a therapist. So the people that got rowdy at the party weren't from that group of people. It wasn't her friends or their brothers. It just got a little rowdy. But it is. I think having scaffolding there is very important. Even if your kid says that they're going to do it, try to make sure that at least they'll be safe.
All right, so there's the next question I just got was, I'm not sure. Oh, let me just read it here clearly. Marijuana is legal and FDA approved, and children are entitled to know that things that parents can do are not necessarily for children, and that's the way they should be taught. Okay, interesting. I guess that's why it wasn't done on Instagram.
Why wasn't
In other words, the idea that this person is saying is, I want to do drugs, and it's okay because I just tell my kids that I could do something you can't do. It's okay for adults. It's not okay for children. I'm not going to say that I don't hear where the person is coming from, but I think when we're dealing with something as serious and severe as what we're living with in this world right now, that's a very different way of expressing that, I think.
I'm with you, Tzvi. Look, it depends how old the kid is. But I think, like, let's take, for example, wine. I think to some degree, some would make the argument that if a parent drinks in moderation and responsibly, has a cup of wine, a glass of wine, or half a glass of wine on a Friday night, or something like that, you're teaching children how to drink responsibly. But I wouldn't, I certainly would not advise parents to do marijuana in front of the kids and tell them that I'm a parent, I can and you can't.
Right. No, absolutely. That's
when you have grandkids,
wow.
Are you going to want their parents doing that in front of them?
No, this is. I mean, it's scary, but this is what people are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You're right. Absolutely. Actually, I would give it a 10 out of 10, not a 9 out of 10. Mikey's comment on that. That it's a great way to turn your kid into an addict.
Yeah.
It's true. And the other concept is to do as I say, not as I do. I mean, that's not. Where is that education? Where is that chinuch habanim? Where is that coming into? Oh, I could do it, you can't. That's not totally not appropriate on any planet.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement. Does anybody else have any questions, folks? We'll stay on a couple of more minutes if anybody does. I think what we're both saying, folks, is speak to your children before Purim, talk to them, be around to answer their questions. I say that if you don't know an answer, if the kids ask you questions about substances and the like, and they say things and you're not sure, don't have the humility to go to somebody else, preferably together with them. Or call your pediatrician together with them. Call somebody like Tzvi. I'm not an expert. Menachem Poznansky is on last night was, any medical doctor, a PA, someone who should be able to answer a lot of the questions. Or you could go to a responsible, what Tzvi said before, but when you're looking up online, make sure that you're looking at a responsible site, like something from the government or the Mayo Clinic, a Mount Sinai hospital or a state government. There's so much good stuff, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. So get something from a responsible site and do some homework together with your child. I think that's our overall message, and what Tzvi said numerous times, to be available if the children make mistakes and they do things, not to shut it down to the point that they won't be comfortable. Confiding, they won't be comfortable getting out of a bad situation if that happens. In 1998, Tzvi, I was informed by some kids I was working with that they were selling drugs on 16th Avenue. There was a whole system with payphones, and I went to check it out at the time. There's a few parts of this that I think are important for everyone. First of all, Rabbi Shera Zatzal told me to meet with the Gedalim, with the Rosh Yeshiva, and ask a question if I should report it to the police. And it was absolutely unanimous, including our great Rabbi Rav Pam, who was as close to an angel as anyone I've ever seen in my life. And he said that they're right for him, that they're putting the right, meaning they pose an existential threat to people. And they must be reported to the police, the people who are pushing. Um, and I went to the 70th precinct, folks. I marched myself into the precinct. I asked for someone at the desk. I said, I'm sure you have a youth officer here. I need an education fast. And I really was not knowledgeable at the time, but I knew I needed to know certain information. So parents, if your kids are using, or you're an educator and you're around people who are, don't be shy and collect information, because it's very, very necessary. I did a talk with Menachem Poznansky 2 days ago that I'm going to be posting it. And I just want to tell everybody, I'm actually writing up a letter from me with lots of links to different talks and different resources. This talk is going to be on with Rabbi, and my talk with Menachem, and other things that other organizations put out. And I'm encouraging schools to send it to their parents, to the members, and schools to send it to their children. I hope to have it by tomorrow already, filled with links. This live is going to be saved here on both our sites, actually. So I'm going to make Amudim, actually, the organization, a collaborator. So Amudim can post it on their site. And I hope to make some little clips. I do this generally when the talk is so long. So to get succinct, short messages, knowing that in 2023, folks might not be inclined to stay on for an hour. Rabbi, keep up your amazing work. Thank you for all you do for the community.
Thank you so much. And listen, we wait for the day that these conversations won't be necessary.
Yeah, but until then, we're both going to stay spunky and have
do what we got to do.
This hinted. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone. And be an ambassador for safety. Pass on the message to everyone. Be well, everyone. Good night. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.